Hello, and thank you for joining me today on Painting with Tracy. My name is Tracy, and I'm going to be your artist. So today, we're going to be doing a painting of a moonshot. I'm not quite sure what else to call it. I have a hard time naming my paintings. As a general rule, I just kind of let things happen, and if somebody wants to name it afterwards, then so be it. What I'm doing right now is I'm wetting my canvas. The reason I'm doing that is because they come pre-gessoed. Now, you're probably asking yourself, what's gesso? Well, gesso, the best way I can think to describe it would be, it's a primer, basically. And the reason that we're wetting it is we're reactivating the gesso and making it so that our paints are going to blend a lot easier on the canvas than they would if we were just hitting it with a dry one. So, today, we're only going to be using 5 colors. We're going to be using cerulean blue, Prussian blue, cadmium yellow, titanium white, and an iridescent white. So now that we've got our canvas nice and wet, you don't want to have it soaking wet. You definitely don't want to see drips running down the front of it. Just an even sheen across the whole thing. But now that we've got that going on, we're going to go ahead and get right into it. And we're going to take our white, and we're just going to give ourselves just a suggestion of a moon here, right smack here in the middle. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it being perfect. Don't worry about your moon being totally circular or anything at this point. You're just kind of getting the paint on the canvas so you've got paint there to give you an idea of where you're working with. So once we get the white on here really good, oh, that's the other thing to remember when you're putting paint on your canvas, is that the thicker your paint is, the longer it's going to take to dry. Now, acrylics, unlike oils, are going to dry on you pretty fast. There are ways that you can, there's mediums and things like that you can add to your paint to slow down the drying process. But in the process of doing that, you're going to change the finish. A lot of times it'll come out with almost a gloss finish. So now that we've got our white on there and we've cleaned our brush, we're going to take our cerulean blue and just go right around the outside edge of where you put your white at. Just wrap it on around there. Again, not worrying about it being perfectly round, not worrying about any of that at this point. The thing to remember, a couple of things to remember while you're doing this is some brush handling techniques. So if you're wanting to put paint on the canvas, you're definitely going to want to have your brush as close to flat against the canvas as possible, and that's going to deposit more of the paint. When you're wanting to blend colors, you're going to hold it up so that your brush is almost totally vertical and just barely swirl it around with the tip. So now that we've got that cerulean on there, we're just going to kind of blend in this white a little bit. Not a whole bunch, just a little. And then, without even rinsing our brush, because we're going to a darker color, we're just going to reach in and we're going to grab some of this Prussian blue. That's going to go all the way around this outside edge. So I don't know about anybody else, but I kind of have a tendency to come up with a tune in my head while I'm doing this. My husband definitely busted me singing the other day and says, "What are you singing?" And it was some silly song that my mom had taught me when I was a kid. And I'm not going to sing it for you right now, but maybe someday. So all I'm doing right now is just getting my background on. We're going to be painting in layers. So when you're doing your painting, you want to kind of think of what's, like when you walk outside and you see people walking down the street, how would you paint that? Well, you're going to start with the street itself because it's your base. And then once you get your base color on for your background, then you'll come along and you'll put in a couple of the details that, like cracks in the sidewalk, things like that. And then you just kind of go from there to where you've actually got people walking down the street or cars driving down the street. But you can't really put cars in there and you can't put a background if you don't start with your base. Or else you got cars just kind of floating around in nowhere. All right, so. Oh, and your easel, I'm pretty sure it's going to look like mine before too long if it doesn't already. So now that we've got the Prussian blue on there, I'm going to grab some more cerulean and just kind of start blending them together. And see, this is what I was talking about when I said you want to have it up on the very edge. Get that going. Check for any white showing. Don't worry about brush strokes. Those are all going to pretty much go away as it dries, unless that's what you're going for. And again, there are different mediums you can add to your paint. There's almost feels like sand. It's a coarse medium, and it makes it so you can texture your paint and get more depth into it. All right. So, because we've got a moon, it's a night sky, and it's a nice, beautiful, clear night sky, we're going to go ahead and splatter some stars on here. And then we'll be just about ready to let it dry for maybe about 5-10 minutes is all it takes to dry, really. Because it doesn't have to be totally dry. Just almost tacky is really all you need. Now to do the stars, I'm going to take my handy dandy toothbrush that I use for pretty much everything. Swirl it around with some white paint, water it down really good so it's got good fluidity. Let's set this over here. Now, again, we are flicking, so I'm going to grab me a little shield here and just flick it as it goes along. And it gives you kind of a random pattern. If you don't want to flick your paint, you don't have to. You can always use the back side of your brush. It's not my studio, so I don't want to fling paint everywhere. I am a guest. All right. Maybe just a little bit thicker on the stars. Just a little though. Right up in here. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. And you can decide if you want to make it a nice densely starred sky. Maybe you only want a couple of stars in there. Maybe you don't want any stars at all. It's entirely up to you. We're going to rinse my brushes really good. And we're going to let this baby rest for, like I said, about 5-10 minutes. And then we'll come back and we'll start defining our moon shape. And we'll go from there. It's going to be awesome. So I get my inspiration from a lot of different places. I spend a lot of time on Pinterest. I like Pinterest is a good it's a good jumping point. It's a good place to start. There's all sorts of different mediums that people use, and they're constantly posting stuff. I really like that when you find a painting or a tutorial on Pinterest, they encourage you to upload what you've done. And so not only can you see their version, but you can see sometimes 10 and 11, 12 people's different versions. There's a couple of websites that I really like to use. Pixabay, Paint My Photo are really good ones. Those are both going to be websites that photographers will upload their photos to. And the majority of them are royalty-free. It doesn't cost you anything to use. Pretty much everything on Pixabay is good. Paint My Photo has a couple of there's a couple of sticky ones on there. So you just gotta, if you do go that route, you just gotta make sure that that you're not infringing on anybody else's copyrights or you know. And it's okay to get inspired by somebody else. It's 100% okay to be inspired by somebody else. It's not okay to take complete credit for it though. So you always want to make sure that you include something like inspired by the original art of so-and-so. Sometimes with Pinterest, it's hard to tell who the original artist was. So I'll go with inspired by something I found on Pinterest, you know, and at least that way I'm giving credit where credit's due, to an extent. Oh gosh, as many as I can get my hands on, to be honest with you. I get down on watercolors. Like, I absolutely love doing watercolors. They're kind of messy, so it's hard to pack around to set up to do something like this. I do have my handy dandy little travel set that's actually with me at all times. It's in the car. These guys right here are this one right here, and then I believe it's the one couple behind me are acrylic pours. That's super hot right now. I'm sure everybody's at least heard of it. They're tons of fun to do. It's kind of hard to mess them up. Like, there's no real rhyme or reason to it. You just kind of let the paint go where it's going to go. These are flip cups back here. This particular one right here, that's a string pull. A lot of fun to do, and it's a very good way for people that don't feel like they can paint or have any artistic ability to get down and actually get some stuff out there. My sister, I turned my sister onto it, and now she's as addicted to it as I am. I do. I'm super intimidated by oil painting. Super intimidated by it. I've tried it once. I guess I think the reason that it bothers me so much is probably the mixing of colors. I know that there's I think it's a lean over fat rule, and it's suggested that you can just keep on painting while it's still wet, whereas with acrylics, if you do it while it's wet, then you're going to make mud. But I guess you can layer your oils. I don't know. And the smell and like the galcolid and galkine, I believe it is, that you use to mix with your oil paint, kind of gives me a little bit of a headache. But I did recently find out, oh my gosh, that they are now making a water-activated oil paint. It's made by Winsor Newton. I haven't had a chance to actually play with it yet, but I think if I do decide to venture into oil, that's probably where I'm going to start. Oh, the window was a couple of days. It was a couple of days because it's the layers. You paint everything in layers, and so we started with a very abstract background and a palette knife. To be honest with you, I love painting with palette knives. We'll see if we can all do that together someday. But you get your background in there, and then you got to let it dry. And because you're painting with a palette knife, it tends to be a lot thicker, goes on a lot heavier than it does with a brush, so it takes a little longer to dry. And then the raindrops go on, and the raindrops themselves are in 3 layers. And then once you get your raindrops on there, then you go through and you put your actual windowsill on. I did not put the ones that have the drops that look like they're running down the glass itself. Those go on after the window box trim does, and then that way you can make sure that it's coming off of a trim rather than. And we're back, and thanks to the magic of television, our canvas is now dry, and we can go ahead and get started on our next layer. So this is where I had talked about earlier, coming back, and we're going to shape up our moon a little bit, get it in order, get it in line, however you want to call it. And we're just going to go ahead and, again, just follow around this outside edge with our titanium white. Now, you're going to see some of your blue come through. White is actually one of the hardest colors to cover with. There's all sorts of shadows and valleys and what's nots that end up in there. Just going to bring it around. Again, not worrying about it being perfect. One of the things to keep in mind right now is that nothing in nature is perfect, making it imperfectly perfect. So we're just going to go ahead and just slap. Oh, I'll be darned. My dog isn't even with me and I still have hair on. Just a little gift he thought I needed this morning or something. So I'm not sure if I've already mentioned it or not, but I'm using an acrylic paint today. Oh, I did. We talked about mediums. So with your acrylic paint, again, they dry super, super fast. If you find out that things are getting sticky on your canvas, what you can do is take and wet your brush just a little bit, wipe it off on both sides, and then just come back and pick up your paint again. If it's too wet, then you can take your rag, because you should always have one handy, and then see you've got paint on it. You just squeeze the base of the bristles right here, and it's going to leave your paint on the brush, but draw some of the water back out of it. Then that way you don't have mud on your canvas. I have definitely gotten a little carried away with the water, and next thing I know, you got drips running down, which isn't bad if you're painting a waterfall, but wouldn't really work with this kind of a scenario. Just bring it on around, swirl it right on around like so. Again, imperfectly perfect is what we are going for. Swirl that guy around right there. So it's just the only thing that you want to keep an eye out for is a thin coat of paint. So say your brush kind of spreads itself out a little bit, and then you've got 3 or 4 little wispies off to the side. Let's see, here, I'll give you an example of one. Where do we need it? All right, so right down here we're a little flat. So if that gets right there at the bottom. I don't know if we can get in nice and close on that, but that's the stuff you want to keep an eye out for. And then you just come along with the edge of your brush, fill it right in. Same thing right over here. And don't be afraid to move your canvas around. Don't be afraid to pick it up and flip it over. I know that when I first started painting, I had a really hard time, I guess, kind of painting things that were upside down. Not necessarily upside down, but just not, we'll go with upside down. That seems the best way to describe it. I haven't been painting very long though, so things are still kind of, everything's new for me. I'm learning as I go. I actually just started painting April of this last year. I thought that I wanted to be an artist when I was in junior high and high school, and I took an art class, and I was really enjoying it, and I unfortunately was not encouraged the way that I feel like I should have been. Either way, I left it behind and I moved on, and April of this last year, my girlfriend Traci talked me into going to paint night with her, and I have been hooked ever since. So while our moon is still wet, take a step back, take a good look at it, and then that way you can see a little bit more what you got going on. It's hard to see exactly what you're doing when you're standing right on top of it. So while our paint's still wet in the moon, I'm going to take what they call a deer's foot, and they call it that because it's shaped like a deer foot, basically. And all we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding in a little bit of texture, a little bit of yellow, a little bit of texture, just kind of dabbing that in there. Because then that way it's going to simulate the craters on the moon that you see when you're laying on your back, staring up at the sky, enjoying a lovely starry evening, and just go random with it. Just dab it in there nice and... Doesn't have to be very thick. We're using a cadmium yellow for this one. Dropping that in there just a little bit more. So, and then we're going to do right along this bottom edge too, because it is round, and so there's going to be these craters all over it. And then if you're feeling like you're getting too yellow, just grab a little bit of this white, pull it off to the side here. A little yellow. And you're just going to make kind of a not quite cream color, a little more yellow than cream. And then you can just go along the outside edge of what you've already done, and it'll blend it without actually having to smear your paint. Bring that in there nice and... So my girlfriend talks me into going to paint night with her, and I have a really good time the first time, and she talks me into going a second time, and I have a really great time the second time, and a couple months goes by, and I've decided that I'm sitting at home bored one day, and I was taking care of cleaning out estates for people. That's what I was doing for work for a little while. And while I was doing that, they would let me take whatever I wanted as far as, because they were going to auction it all off anyway. I just had to clear it with them, and I had a thing for art supplies. I like to donate them to local groups that do art with kids and low-income families and whatnot that couldn't, as a general rule, afford to be able to do this kind of a gig. So I was donating them to him, and I was super bored, and I happened to have a box of watercolors, and I thought, oh, I wonder if I can watercolor. And turns out I could, and it just exploded from there. I'm now hosting my own paint nights. I have a once-a-week painting event up in Oregon City that I really enjoy doing. Go ahead and take another step back real quick. Look what we got going on. I like it. I'm really digging it. But so I started doing these watercolors, and then it turns out I can, and I reached a point where I felt like I wasn't getting any better. I was running out of things to paint, so I started watching YouTube tutorials. And there we go. Really enjoy doing the YouTube tutorials. They just get a little confusing sometimes because it doesn't show you what actually happens off the scene. They edit out a lot of rinsing your brush and things like that. Just keep in mind that nobody's ever going to paint anything as fast as they do on YouTube. They don't even paint it as fast as they do on YouTube. And chances are they probably made 6 or 7 mistakes that you're never ever going to see because, editing and hopefully. Well, folks, I think that now that we've got our moon where we want it, we're in another holding pattern, and we're just going to go ahead and give it a couple of minutes to dry. And then we're going to come in and we're going to start actually adding the meat of the painting to. We're going to start throwing our birch forest down. So, all right, folks, we'll give you just a few minutes and we'll be right back. So, that's a good question too. So when I first started doing paint night, listen to me, I sound like I've been doing it forever. I really haven't been doing it that long. When I first started doing paint night about, I'm going to say 4 months ago, I would actually paint the subject painting. I'd probably paint it 3 and 4 times before it was time to go in there because I'd be so nervous that I wouldn't be able to actually transfer the information that I needed to somebody. I'd be afraid that I was going to skip steps and stuff like that. And now now it's just kind of become like almost second nature for me when I'm doing it. And I've changed up my format too. I try to paint with the people at paint night rather than just have a completed one done and to look at it. I find that if I'm painting with people, then I can go over brush handling techniques, and I can go over the actual stroke that we're doing, and it makes it easier for people to follow along when they see me actually do it with them. And so I try not to practice too much, because if I do, then I tend to rush through stuff. Because I mean, it works for me. I've done it so many times. It should work for you too. Yeah, there's a lot of times you can actually do one right over the top of the other. It depends on the thickness of the medium, what the mix actually that you add to it, whatever additives that you put in it. So for that particular one, the shimmer that you're seeing on all the snow, that's actually a clear that's just got a little bit of glitter and sparkles put into it. And that one was a lot of fun to do. The Northern Lights themselves, I put those directly on top of that dark blue background so that it could kind of blend a little bit, because I didn't want it to look like it was a secondary thing. I wanted it to look like it was an actual part of the sky itself.
Like the hydro dipping.
You know, I have not hydro dip. But I've checked it out. It's similar, I think. In with the hydro, it's my understanding you get your bucket of water and you put your paint on top, and then you just dip into it, and the paint forms a layer on top of the water, and then it almost wraps basically what you're dipping. With the pour, it's super similar to that. You're going to put a bunch of paint in your cup, and so flip cup is one of my favorites. It's a lot of fun to do. You're going to put your paint and your silicone into your cup so that it makes the cells. Set your canvas straight on top of it, and instead of dipping it, you're just going to flip the whole thing over and lift up the cup. So it's like just dumping a whole bunch of paint onto your canvas and basically watching it do something awesome. You can force cells out of it with a blowtorch. So I mean, who doesn't love playing with a blowtorch? Those are the cells that I was talking about. Yeah, those are the cells, and you do that with silicone. It'll do it on its own naturally, but by adding the silicone to it, it'll produce more. When you pull out the blowtorch, so say when I'm layering stuff into a cup, I put a little bit of white in the bottom, because you want to put something with a heavy pigment in the bottom, and white is the most heavily pigmented color. So you get that down in there, and then you put like a couple of drops of silicone on top of it, and then you do another layer and another color and another color. And then you'll throw in a couple more drops of silicone and another color and another color. And so when it all comes out of the cup, a lot of times it'll layer itself, and you won't necessarily see all the colors because they're sitting on top of each other. Well, the one that has the silicone in it, you take the blowtorch to it, and it's going to make it rise to the surface. And so it's going to force that up to the very top. And so you can draw a lot of color. Not only are you drawing your cells and creating your cells with the blowtorch, but you're pulling color through all the others. It's pretty neat. I enjoy doing it a whole bunch. This one, the string pull, it's just a matter of soaking your string in whatever color you're wanting to, whatever color you choose, and you just lay it out on the canvas and pull. That's it. Super fun. All right, folks, so now that we've given our moon a sufficient amount of time to dry, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to start laying in our trees. So to do that, I'm going to be using my angle brush. It's a 1/4 inch angle brush. I prefer the long handle. It's just a matter of preference. Basically, the use of your brush is going to be a matter of preference, because just do what makes you feel good. Do what's most comfortable in your hand. If you do decide to go with the angle brush, the only really important thing that you need to remember is that you want to keep the tail of it. So we've got one end that's longer than the other. You want to keep that at the back of your stroke. And the reason we do that is because you can make your lines as thick or as thin as you want with pressure. But if you have your tail to the front, you're basically just plowing. So you can't ever have a thin line. So we can show you right here. So you just go like that. So you're always going to have that big, thick, heavy line. So what I'm doing here is I'm just dropping in trees, having them come up into my moon. I'm going to grab just a little bit of this iridescent white that I mentioned earlier. We're going to throw some accents into these guys, just a little bit. We're going to widen that one up some. So We're painting a birch forest today. You can do whatever kind of forest you want. I like the birch forest. It seems like it goes with just about anything. Birch forests are easy. They make you feel good. They're everywhere, all over the country, all over the world. It's not any area specific. So with this painting, I'm kind of trying to give the illusion of like the forest of your dreams when you were a little kid and you had a tree house and it was wonderful and you used to lay on your back on the ground and just stare at the sky and nothing else mattered. So we're just dropping these babies in and bringing them into the center. Come off the bottom, bring it into the center. Now I get that you can't see it right now, but you'll see the tops of these trees are going to pop out of the moon by the time we're done. So thicken it up a little bit as you go, just to darken it some. Still with the angle brush. Again, I prefer it. It's an easier one for me to work with. I know people that like to use a round. I know people that like to use a flat brush for this kind of a thing. It becomes a matter of preference. And you'll find that the more often you paint and the more you do this, you'll discover which one works the best for you. I would like to invite any and everybody that chooses to go ahead and try doing one of these to send that in to us. We'd love to share that on TV. I mean, at the very least, send you a little message and we can talk about it. I have a Facebook page. It's facebook.com/@paintingwithtraci, I do believe. Pretty sure you can get there though if you just Google Painting with Traci. And like I said, I'd love to see your guys' version. I'd love to see what you do with it. I'd love to see you take this and turn it into something even totally different. I had mentioned that paint night that I do earlier. That's probably one of my favorite parts about doing paint night is seeing everybody's different versions of it. And you can actually check those photos out too if you go to that Painting with Traci. I like to post group photos and then that way we can all see what we've done. So now that we have most of our trees in, we're going to bring in one more down here. We're going to make this guy super long and come all the way across. Now that we have most of those in, we're going to start working on our branches. So anywhere where it looks, we'll start with this guy. So we've got a nice, I call it a wumple, little spot right here. That's where my branch is going to come off. We're just going to bring it and we're just going to swirl it right off of there. Do the same thing on the other side. Swirl it right off of there. And then off of that little swirl, we're going to have another little swirl. And you're going to do that all the way around. All the way around. And the branches are going to crisscross each other and it's all going to bring it in. There we go. So right now I'm not doing the branches at the top of the tree because in nature those are going to be thinner, narrower branches. And I personally think that this brush might be a little bit too thick for me today. I mean, it's not a deal breaker though by any means. You can still just not put as much pressure on it and your branches will be thinner. But I did just buy a new angle brush that I'm super excited about using. And it's a little guy. I'm going to get this in here all the way around. And then once we get all the trees laid in, we're going to come in and we're going to put some accents into the trees themselves. You know, because much like a birch forest, it's not just a white tree. It's got the little lines that go in it and different sorts of areas where the bark's peeled off or maybe a deer or a beaver's been in there and decided they need a little snack. And I'm just thickening my trees as I go around. Bring that right there, drop that down. And again, don't be afraid to pick up your canvas, move it around, flip it over if you want. I've gotten pretty good at painting sideways and upside down since I started hosting paint nights. It's kind of hard to lead a group of people to paint along with you when you're standing right in front of the canvas that we're all trying to watch. And the other thing to keep in mind while you're painting is less is more. Because we add so many layers of stuff, there's going to be leaves and smaller branches and whatnot that we're going to layer on top of the trees that we have here. So it's going to fill in. It's not going to have this blank spaces that it looks like we have now. And then I'm just going to add a little treetop right there, just a little one. And then a tiny little branch right there. Take a step back, look at what you've got going on. I'm liking where we're going with this. Okay. So once I step back and I can take a look at things, I can see that I've got a bit of a void spot right here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in another branch right there. And because it's a thicker tree, we're going to make it a nice, thick, healthy branch. Just like so. Let it swirl. And a little straggler coming off that one right there. That's all right if you do that with, see how I just went over my tree and it looks like it disappeared? Easy fix. Ta-da. Take another step back, look at it again, find out where your void spots are, where it needs something more. I'm seeing something down here maybe. Possibly. No, actually, you know, I think I like that negative space. I think I like what it does for us. So I'm going to clean my brush off really good. Clean my brush off really, really good. I find the best way to clean your brush is almost with a figure 8 pattern in your water, but you're going to find what works best for you. I learned how to paint basically watching YouTube tutorials. And one of the most frustrating things that I discovered while I was teaching myself to paint, thank you YouTube, was they never show you washing the brush. They never show you doing any of that stuff. So it's a must though, you gotta do it. So I'm gonna take this brand new brush of mine that I'm super excited about. I'm just gonna go around the canvas coming off of each one of these and just add in some little branches, just little stragglers coming off of there. A couple of little guys right there. A couple more little guys right over here. And then maybe this little spot right down in here. There we go. All right. Nice. So now, to drop in some accents, we're going to go ahead and we're going to pick up a little bit of our titanium white that I told you about earlier. And just, let's see, where did we start at on here? I'm going to find the driest one. I'm going to go with this guy right here. And we're not going to cover the whole tree. We're just going to, there's some random little spots here and there on the branches. And this iridescent white is pretty opaque, so it's not going to really pop a whole bunch so much as it's going to give it sparkle. That way, when your painting's all done and people are looking at it and they take a step this way, it's going to flash at them just a little bit. And they're going to be like, what? Did that just happen? Sure did. There we go. Some of these in here. No, I don't have black with me today, but I do have all these other wonderful colors. So what we're going to do is we're going to mix, and we're going to make ourselves a really nice dark green so that it's almost black, but not quite. So to do that, I'm going to take my Prussian blue, a whole bunch of my Prussian blue, and just the tiniest little bit of my cadmium yellow. Just mix them in together. And don't be afraid to get crazy with it. Like, go nuts mixing it. It's a lot of fun. I like painting with watercolors a whole bunch, and I find that I spend almost as much time watching the colors mix as I do actually painting and putting them onto my paper. So that's still pretty blue. We're going to pick up just a little bit more of this yellow, not much. We don't want it to go full green. It's almost a forest green. There we go. It's coming out more like a turquoise or a dark, dark teal, which is great. That works too. All right, so we got it mixed up like we want it. And then we're just going to take and we're going to offload our brush back onto our palette. There we go. We're going to come back and pick up just a little bit. So it's easy to put your hand on your canvas while you're painting. It actually helps quite a bit. But if you feel like that's something you need to do, then go ahead and let your canvas dry at this point. I kind of like to blend my accent colors with the background of the tree, and with my white being still just a little sticky. I feel like it sets it down in rather than on top of. Make sure that you get accents in the branches, especially going across the other trees. That's going to help to establish depth and dimension in your painting. Bring it in a little bit here. Just a little bit here. Not a whole lot. It's a white tree. And then this is, remember I told you it was going to come across in your moon? This is where it's coming across at. A tiny little branch right there. Another little accent here. And just work your way around your forest. Well, I don't know if I had mentioned it earlier, but I have no formal art training whatsoever, so chances are there's probably a better way, or at least another way, to do anything that I'm talking to you about today. Please feel free to do it however it works for you. Like if it's easier for you to wait and let it dry, like I said, and rest your whole arm on the canvas, do it that way. If you decide that you just want to hold the canvas in your hand and paint, that's a doable thing too. Whatever makes you happy. Less is more, so we're just kind of dabbing this little guy in there. Pick up just a hair more of this paint that we got over here. We're going to bring this one, it's a little bit much on our brush. And we're going to bring this guy all the way up to the tip of that tree. And I'm just barely skimming the canvas with my angle brush. Just barely. I giggle because all of a sudden I have this vision of a Bob Ross show that I watched when I was a kid once. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about that, but it just made me giggle. Couple more accents. Again, making sure that we definitely want to make sure we get the tops of those trees in there. Around here, a bit more down in here. All right, we're almost all the way around it already. Heck yeah. It's that nice long one that we put in there, so we're going to bring that all the way up there. Do a couple of branches off of it. A couple more over here. Over here. Some over here. Let's get this guy right in here too. I like that. Take a step back and look at it. Oh, this is getting fun. All right. So, I'm going to clean this spot up right here because now that I've taken a step back, I'm not really liking how sharp that is. There we go. Wiggle that guy just a little bit. There we go. See, now you're starting to see what we got going on here. So now that you've got accents in all of your trees, at least somewhere, hopefully, now you just start playing with it. Just take a couple steps back, look and see where you want to branch. We're going to add some more branches on that guy right there. Some right there. Another one right there. It's kind of funny the way that when you paint over the top of another color, it changes it. When we're doing this color that we've mixed up over the top of the white, it's clearly extra blue. When we get up into the moon and it gets over near where the yellow is, it turns to more of a green. Bring that down there. A couple more branches over here, I think. And then we're going to do basically the same thing with a little bit of white to these branches that are going up over the moon. These little guys in there. There we go. I'm liking this a lot. Drop in a couple of more. Okay. Take a step back, look at your canvas. I'm really liking this. Okay. A little bit more down in here. Now, this is your forest, it's your painting, so you can put in as many trees or as many branches as you want. Again, I firmly believe that less is more, and it's easy to add more trees and more branches later than it is to take them out. I also think it's super important to finish all of your paintings. Like, you're guaranteed to have at least 3 stages in your painting where it looks not nice. We'll go with that. I think the best way I've ever heard it put was it's at the awkward teenage stage. We're going to go ahead and bring these guys around in here. There we go. Take a step back and look at it. I'm super happy with where that's at right now. I'm going to go ahead and accent those branches up at the top of our trees right in here in our moons with some white to kind of make them pop out just a little bit more, and then we're going to let it dry a little bit and we'll put on our finishing touches. Sometimes it's easier to wipe your brush off on your paint or on your towel or your rag. I like to use rags. I like to use whatever I have laying around the house usually. You're guaranteed to have something that should be thrown out, especially at my house. And rather than throw it out, I like to reuse it, and so I repurpose it into a rag. I've repurposed many items. Again, at paint night, I had a lady give me a bag of actually, well, I shouldn't even tell you the story, but I had a lady give me a bag of underwear that were her son's that he had outgrown very quickly because he hit a growth spurt, and she just didn't know what to do with them. And well, they're underwear, so you don't want to wear somebody else's used underwear, so what better thing to turn it into than a paint rag? And you should have seen the look on everybody's face when I pulled out the rags that day. There we go. Bring that in there. There we go. Just a little bit of accenting, just barely, you're just kind of glazing it. Because you don't want to cover up everything that you just did. And if you don't want to accent it with white, if you don't want to mute these up here on top, you don't have to. You definitely don't have to. I think I got a little heavy with it right there for my liking, so I'm going to go ahead and bring that guy up right. We're going to make that a nice tall one. I think we're going to change that a little bit. Yeah, that's better. All right, folks, I'm super happy with where it's at. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and let it dry just a little bit, and we'll come back and we'll put on our finishing touches. Super easy. Yeah, I've turned my basement into, it's my paint room now. It's my paint studio. It's a very short little hobbit basement, and so I'm pretty much the only one in my house that could actually fit down there comfortably. So I've claimed it. It's my space, and sometimes I get really animated when I'm painting or doing pours, and so yeah, there's paint all over my basement. I do a lot of, I really enjoy doing the pours over glass. That's a lot of fun. I've got some wine glasses that I recently painted and gave away as gifts to some friends of mine. I gave them a set and they're super excited about. I'd love to show you someday. I'm sure that we'll get the opportunity to bring, sorry, I just looked right at the camera. I'm sure we'll get the opportunity to bring that in and show everybody. I'd like to be able to do that with y'all someday too. I've done them over wood. You can do it over acrylic. I'm working on a new thing now where I'm using the pours as a background and then painting over the top of it. I wish I had one with me. I've got one at home that I'm working on, and I did similar to the string pole with my acrylic pour, and similar to this guy over here with the tree. You just take your bottle of color. You do your background, take your bottle of color, give it a suggestion for where you would like the color to go, and then you pick it up and you swirl it. And so I've got it's a landscape background. It's a little mountain lake with some trees around it and whatnot. And then I've gone ahead and I've painted the window frame over the top of that, and it looks a lot better than I was originally expecting. It's pretty cool. Not finished with it yet, but I think it's going to be awesome when it's done. No, I tried to take an art class, like I said, when I was much younger, I want to say 8th or 9th grade, and it just didn't work out for me. I didn't feel like I was where it was supposed to be. I personally cannot draw. I could not draw to save my life. I can sketch, and that's basically what saves me, but not being able to draw, I got turned off to the whole art thing, and I just assumed that because I wasn't instantly good that I wasn't capable. I didn't really pursue it as a youth. And now that I've started doing it, I can't stop. I'm addicted. It's ridiculous. I'm obsessed. And YouTube is honestly where I learned a lot of my stuff from. Thank you, YouTube, and the Frugal Crafter, and Cinnamon Cooney, the Art Sherpa, and all these other people that are willing to put themselves out there and teach us so that we can learn how to do what we really enjoy doing, and because we all want to be good at what we're doing. Oh, I think I know what you're saying. So, I actually, I like to bedazzle my pores, to be honest with you. I don't know if you can see it in, let's see which one. I don't know that I have one with me right now. I have several, though, that I've gone through, and I take it's like a foil confetti, I guess, the plasticky foil confetti. That's a lot of fun to put on there, and you can just jazz up your pour with it. I've started using it on my acrylic paintings also, and it just kind of gives it that extra, more depth, more depth. I'm going to go with texture, lots of texture. I love texture. So any chance I get to do that. Glitter, oh my gosh, glitter and nail jewels actually make wonderful, wonderful accents for your canvases. Oh, so it's again layers. It's all layers. I just painted my background first. I started with my sky, and then I did the ocean, and then I thought, well, let's stick some islands in there, and we put the palm trees in. But you want to make sure whenever you're doing a frame like that you do everything underneath of it, because you're going to have bits and pieces that are like the tree, over to the far right or left. Sorry, I couldn't remember which way I was facing. Anyway, on this side of the painting, there's a palm tree that you just barely see poking through the edge there, and it wouldn't have looked right if I were to add that after the fact. It's got to go in first. And you can always add it after that. It's just going to look, it gives it a more finished, a much more completed look if you make sure you just do the whole background. Yeah, layers, 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 like onions. Says Shrek. All right, folks, so we're back, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in our finishing touches and get this all wrapped up today. So I've switched brushes. I'm now using a round. I do believe it's a number 1 or number 2. It's one of the smaller ones. And like I mentioned earlier, just pick whatever brush just makes you the most comfortable. So what I'm using right now is it's a metallic green. And I thought that maybe the metallic green and the iridescent accents that we put in the tree would set each other off really nicely. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to put in little leaf buds. So load your brush with paint, and then from the tip we're just going to drop them in here and there because it's springtime in my forest. And you can put as many as you want or as little as you want, and just go random. Like, get crazy with it. If you want, you can, instead of doing leaves, you could do flowers. There's all sorts of stuff. There's lots of ways to finish this painting off, really. I've done one similar to this before for a paint night. We did it around Halloween time, and so we didn't get any leaves or anything in it because it's fall and it's Halloween. Instead, I hid a bunch of bats in it. Bats are super easy to do. We'll get to that someday. But there were so many little branches that you couldn't hardly see the bats, and so it was very subtle. I like that a lot. I stuck an owl in it. We could put an owl in one of these branches, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to leave that up to you to finish. Love to see your finished product. And just make sure you get some leaves up in your moon area, because again, that's going to bring your trees forward. A little random guy right there growing straight off the trunk. A couple of these little guys right there. Not a lot, just a little. Just a little. My sister and my nephew came up to visit me 2 weekends ago. My nephew's about 2.5. Full of questions, full of excitement, and he just wanted to paint with Aunt Ray. Wanted to paint, so I finally said, all right, we'll go and we'll paint something. He painted the cutest little triceratops I've ever seen in my life. And now he's hooked, though. I had to go ahead and buy him his own easel, send it home with his mom. Just dropping some more of these in here. because it's really early spring in the forest, and so again, there's not a whole bunch. Take just a brief step back, look at what you got going on. I think we need a little bit more along the bottom side there. We don't really have anything going on down there. So drop in a couple more right there. And then we're going to put some right up in here too, because sometimes leaves grow right out of where the branch comes out. Do that. If you want, you can paint some ferns in there. I can't remember the name of the fern that grows on trees. It only grows in basically this little area of a tree. For some reason, it doesn't grow on the ground. Gosh, I can't remember what that is. My professor would be so upset with me right now. A little bit more right there. Some right there. Go down there. You can just keep adding leaves if you want. You can do a full forest. You can do just a little forest. But this is pretty much it, folks. One more step back. A couple more up in here. Right there. A little bit more right there. I like this guy right here. A whole bunch. And we're gonna, this branch right here, I'm gonna accent that one so you can see that it goes behind the, there we go. This little guy needs something. See, and now that my canvas is dry, I can put my hands directly on it. Just be careful now that you've got leaves everywhere that you don't put your hand in your leaves and smear them. Couple more right there. Take another step back. I am super happy with that, folks. So now, last little bit is to sign it. We're gonna go and sign this baby right down here in the corner. Boom. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'd really love to see your finished product, and I hope you join me again.